Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Coffee and Football, presented by Rick Vavro and Austin Underground. I'm your host, Blake Monroe, where I'm joined each and every morning by Bobby Burton and CJ Vogel. And guys, what an action-packed day it was, pretty much all day yesterday. But it wasn't just during the day, as it went late into the evening. Texas flipped four-star linebacker Ty Anthony Smith. I don't think we were surprised. We knew it was coming, but what a pickup, am I right?
Yeah, I think it was. Look, he'd played his cards close to the vest the entire recruiting term, in my opinion. Even before he chose A&M, he wasn't necessarily saying where he was going to go. This was back during the summer. And then, he scheduled a couple of visits to Texas that he ended up not taking. Yet last Friday, he had scheduled a visit and did not tell people, wasn't going public about the visit. And then he ended up showing up on campus at the University of Texas. That followed through with Texas telling him he would be the only linebacker the Longhorns would take in this recruiting class, as well as the turmoil going on in College Station today, or this week, or whenever you want to call it. All of that combining together, Ty Anthony Smith, linebacker out of Jasper, one of the top 2 or 3 linebackers in the state of Texas, flipped last night, putting the cherry on the top of a Longhorn recruiting class that finished with 22 signees and 2 portal transfers. It was apropos of how this Texas recruiting cycle has gone. What do you think, CJ?
Yeah, 100%. I thought you started off the day strong in terms of holding on to guys that were potentially poaching candidates. Ryan Wingo and Missouri had some flirtations. Obviously, Nebraska thought they had an outside chance on coming in late for Brandon Baker. You hold on to those guys, and you stumble a little bit with Aaron Hampton, but you finish incredibly strong in a class that, again, is looking like it's going to finish top 5, potentially top 4, top 3 in that conversation, depending on how the dominoes fall. But I'm a big fan of Ty Anthony Smith, and for him to be the only linebacker in the class, I think you get a good one there.
No doubt about it, guys. Well, and I just saw this comment here that I wanted to bring up because this is actually what I was going to talk about next. Cordy says Trey Moore is next, in my opinion. Bobby, what's the latest on Trey Moore, the transfer from UTSA?
Yeah, I have actually some breaking news here from his representation. Trey Moore told folks last night that he will have a decision this weekend that will come down between Texas and Alabama. There's no guess about whether Texas is leading or Alabama is leading. I was told that it was thought that Texas was going to be a shoe-in, but that Alabama has made it very tough. And so the UTSA linebacker with 14.5 sacks this season, 17 tackles for loss, he will be making his decision by this weekend, he's told folks. So we'll see where that goes. I don't know if it's 50-50 or what it is, but the number is definitely not 100% either team at this point, is my understanding. He is still yet to make a decision, at least as of late last night.
All right, guys. Well, I want to circle back to that recruiting class for a minute. 17 early enrollees. And either one of you that wants to touch on this, how important is that for Texas moving forward? I mean, that's a high number, an absurdly high number.
Yeah, it's a huge number. And I think it's a testament to what Texas is building for these guys to want to be a part of it this early. It's kind of easy to sit back if you're a high school kid and say, you know what, we got prom in the spring. I got spring break with the fellas one more year with the boys I've spent, the last 10 years with in high school. I can kind of hold off on me starting this whole wake up at 6 a.m. kind of nonsense and go run bleachers with Torrey Beckton. I don't know if I'm built for that. But because of the culture that's been instilled and the success that we've seen on the field, it's hard for these guys to not say, hey, I want to be a part of that. I want to go get myself ready to play college football and do so for Texas because I've seen what it's like to be on the field. I've seen the success that they've had, and I've seen the culture that I want to be a part of. And that's ultimately, at the end of the day, why they signed with Texas, and a large part in why they want to join the program so early, to get that extra semester of development and acclimated to the speed, the life of being a college football athlete at the University of Texas.
No doubt about it. And, Sark even said yesterday that they're not done. guys. So, I mean, that's a pretty telling comment there. We'll talk about his presser in a minute, but what was y'all's takeaway from that?
When he said that, Anthony Smith was clearly one of those because I think they had his signature already in, and we're just holding for him to make his announcement, in front of folks in Jasper like he did last night. That's commonplace. So that would be one. Trey Moore is obviously another. The young man out of UTSA we just talked about. Now, there's another group that we need to start talking about. That is this. Don't forget that Texas is still looking at a defensive lineman. 3 of them are Alex Foster out of Greenville, Mississippi. He did not sign yesterday, originally committed to Baylor, stayed committed to Baylor, but visited Texas last weekend. Dominic McKinley, the 5-star out of Lafayette, Louisiana. He's in contact weekly and almost daily now with Bo Davis and Steve Sarkeesian. LSU's also involved. He's been committed to A&M, but A&M was unable to retain their defensive line coach who recruited him, Elijah Robinson. So I think McKinley, very unlikely to stick with A&M at this point, whether it's Texas or OU or somebody or even LSU or somebody else, I don't know. But I do think Texas is squarely in the mix there. And then De'Alen Evans, the linebacker or the defensive tackle out of Longview's Pine Tree High School, he is set up to visit Texas in January. He's committed to A&M, but yesterday came out and said that Texas was his favorite school growing up. Look, I don't know about you, but that sounded like, man, I really would like to go to Texas. And now that they want me, I'm really kind of excited. And so Texas is going to try to get at least one of those 3, if not 2. So that would push the number from 22 right now to probably 23, possibly 24. Sark also said during the presser that he wants one more receiver. Now, he didn't say whether that would be through the portal, which I think is definitely possible based on who else goes in the portal after the bowl games from a lot of teams. That's number one. Or he could reach into the high school ranks and go after Terry Bussey at Timpson, who is still committed to A&M, but is clearly now, he didn't sign yesterday either. And he could be a possibility. He lit up the 2A state championship game. Or Steve Sarkeesian yesterday offered a young man out of Calabasas, California that we've been talking about, Aaron Butler, a 6 foot, 185 wide receiver that lit up the folks up there. So look, my opinion on this right now is there's still some meat left on the bone. It's not the whole cow like we were dealing with yesterday, but there's a couple of filet mignons, a porterhouse out there. There's still some work left to be done, not just in the high school recruiting, but also from a portal perspective as well.
No doubt about it. Well, he had a lot of interesting comments in that press conference. And one of the things that really stood out to me, and this is something that CJ reported right here on Coffee and Football earlier in the week, was that there were still 3 players practicing with the team, even though they're in the portal. Of course, that being Casey Kane, Sawyer Gorham-Welch, and Larry Turner-Gooden. And so, he reaffirmed what CJ said, but guys, I mean, there was just a ton of takeaways from that press conference, not only from a recruiting standpoint, but team news as well.
I think one of the interesting things about that comment that he made was, he had to change his philosophy. Earlier in his tenure at Texas, it wasn't, a topic of conversation. There wasn't a dialogue there. It was, you're either with us or you're hitting the road. And I think that's a sign of maturity, and it's obviously a sign of respect to these kids to say, you're part of the reason why we got here. I understand that, there's kind of some, I would say room for improvement with the portal window, especially for teams in the college football playoff, because obviously this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for a lot of kids to play in, or at least play for, a national championship opportunity. So it's unfortunate, yes, that they have to look to better their future and miss out on a chance to win the national title. But it's also a sign of growth and maturity for Sarkeesian and his staff to say, you know what, come be a part of this while you look for your next home, while you look for what's better for you down the road. Because let's be honest, a lot of the guys who are transferring, it's probably tough for them to get on the field as much as they would like to hope. And at the end of the day, the kids that go play college football do what? They want to play college football. And I think, it's a great sign for Sarkeesian and his staff to be able to adapt to the changing times of college football and do so on the fly. And obviously, I think this goes a long way to show, if things don't go right for you at Texas, the staff will still take care of you and look out for your best interests.
Hey, let me ask you this, CJ. You were up there yesterday at the press conference. Asked a good question, by the way. I really liked Sark's response to that. The thought process right now, you were up there a little bit. I know you did a little deeper dive, et cetera. What was the behind the scenes feel really in the coach's office, that sort of stuff for the Longhorns yesterday?
Yeah, Sarkeesian, I mean, he walked in with a little bit of pep, and I think that was obviously that was probably 4 hours before the news of Ty Anthony Smith, but he was excited. He held on to his big dogs. The rest of the class signed. There's 17, kids coming in at the semester. I got a text, midway through the day saying, the energy in Moncrief was tremendous. The vibe was very high. And I think for most signing days, and we saw it, Bobby, in terms of Texas A&M, Florida, Florida State lost a pair of 5 stars as well. It wasn't all sunshine and rainbows for programs across the country. And I can obviously, I can only speak for Texas, but the word that I got from inside the building was, we're very happy with how the day progressed. And obviously with the top 5 ranking right now, it's hard to not be, over the moon about the potential, obviously, and what else can eventually join the class.
You mentioned Florida State in that group, and news broke just before we came on air. Florida State, according to The Athletic, apparently having an emergency board meeting on Friday, this coming Friday at 9 a.m. Central, that will help expedite them to challenge their grant of rights in the ACC. What does that mean? Does that mean they could be going to the Big 12? Does that mean they're going to try to get into the SEC? But if Florida State is able to break the grant of rights within the ACC, we could see this future conference that Chip Kelly, that Charlie Baker, the president of the NCAA, has talked about. That is really the last piece that has to break, in my opinion. If the ACC breaks, and their grant of rights is through 2036. Otherwise, we're talking about 12 more years of probably not being able to create a larger super conference where everybody just plays everyone else and that sort of thing. They are having an emergency board meeting on Friday that apparently, according to The Athletic, is a precursor to their attempt to get out of their grant of rights with the ACC. They clearly are the leading revenue generator in the ACC, Clemson, North Carolina, the other two there. But it will be very, very interesting to see exactly what happens with that. But that is a national news story that clearly could impact not only Texas but all of college football.
No doubt about it. It's going to be interesting for sure. And guys, we got plenty of time to get your questions in, so please do so. Former Texas running back Fozzy Whitaker should be joining us here in just a little bit, hoping to get him lined up and get him in here to talk to y'all today. And we got a super chat, guys, that we're going to go ahead and jump over to. This one from Seth Alcazir. Hope I'm saying that right, Seth. If not, I apologize. He says, I know stars aren't everything, though it is well documented that the blue chip ratio is important. But what do we think the reason is that Texas may not be attacking as many 5-star defensive linemen?
Well, first, there are not many of them.
Yeah, there's not many of them. What is Colin Simmons? He's an edge. There's not many of them, and there's not many of them in the state of Texas either. So you're limited by that a little bit, and it's not like Texas didn't go after Dominic McKinley, who is a 5-star, who still is unsigned, initially committed to A&M. There could be a number of factors. I will say this. I mean, Texas's internal rankings of Alex January, Melvin Hills, and DeAndre Robinson are not reflective of the industry ratings of those players. So Alex January and DeAndre Robinson, Texas, I can't sit here and speak for the staff, but they certainly think that they were better than the 350th best player in the country. They think they're both future NFL players. Melvin Hills, as Steve Sarkeesian said yesterday, they had in camp. They liked him in camp. If a coach gets a guy in camp and they like him, and you know that coach has a history of developing players, they're going to take that guy every single time. And that's what they did with Melvin Hills. And so 5-star or not, Seth, I think that they're really happy with their interior defensive haul so far. So there's from Grant, 6 5-star DLs in the class of 2024, 0 from the state of Texas. We'll see if there's one next year. The young man out of Lufkin is a possibility. I think down in Spring, there's one as well that had a great year that Texas just offered, I guess, on Monday, right after Brandon Brown committed. Brandon Brown is a possibility out of Ogali. He's already committed to Texas next year. So just because you didn't see it this year doesn't mean you won't see it in future years as well.
And CJ, were you about to say something?
I was just going to say, look at what, Bo Davis has been able to do with guys who aren't 5 stars. I think that's very impressive on its own.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I like this comment here about Alex January. Had a huge year and is no way a 3-star. I think we can all be in agreement with that comment. I just don't see the 3-star rank.
If you watch any of the state championship game in the first 2 quarters, say there was a debate whether or not in the first quarter who the best player on the defense for Duncanville was. Right? As the pass game as North Shore had to go to the pass, that changed a little bit because Colin Simmons is a freak. Yep. But you know what I mean? The interior push by Alex January was significant against North Shore, and is one of the reasons. Not only do they have a offense that was on fire early, but one of the reasons that North Shore was held at bay early, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, and Bobby, I saw the last 3 Duncanville games. And what did I text you every weekend? I'm not so sure Alex January is not the best player on the field. And it was every single week that I think I sent you that text.
Yep. So no doubt. And my Blake, the other piece of it that people don't realize, and we had Mike January on the show, and we've talked to him outside the show as well, and gotten some feedback from him. The thing that he really is focused on with his son, Mike played at Texas, by the way. The thing that he's really focused on with his son the last couple of years is his work with his hands. He said that, look, being a defensive lineman is about getting people off of you, taking up space and getting push. And he said that his son right now, he goes, look, I don't know about whether he's more talented than this guy or that guy. I mean, all these guys are talented. He goes, I know Alex is working his butt off with his hands, and he's going to be ready to go more so than some other guys that come in. And because of that reason, that's one of the guys I mentioned yesterday. If there's an underrated recruit in this class, that was the first guy that I really kind of mentioned on defense.
Yeah, Bobby, real quick, if I can add to that. I mean, I remember at the All-American Bowl down in San Antonio, one of those big All-Star All-American games. I was covering Alfred Collins at the time. And, Alfred Collins from Bastrop, you see him in these games against, high school kids, and he's 6'5" and can move very well. He's an athletic guy. He's walloping them in high school, but when he gets to these All-American games, you're met with kids that are the same talent level, the same height, weight, etc. He looked at me and he goes, "Man, I'm getting cooked." I'm like, "Really?" He's like, "You think so?" And he goes, "It's like I've got to learn how to use my hands. I got to learn pass rushes." He's like, essentially the strength isn't going to translate. You need to fine-tune your skills. And that was something that I learned very quickly. You need to be able to do that. And that's a big part of it, is using your hands to be able to get, disengage, long arm, everything along the lines of a defensive lineman starts with your hands. And I thought that was a big part of it.
All right, guys. Well, as I said a minute ago, we have Fozzy Whitaker coming up in here in just a second. But, Bobby, before we get to him, I'm going to let you tell everybody out there about Austin Underground.
Yeah, I appreciate Rick Vavro. He's been with us throughout this season. He's been excited about each and every game. He's going to be down in New Orleans in a couple of weeks as well. Since 2004, Rick and his team at Austin Underground have specialized in difficult underground commercial installations, be they public or private enterprises. The team's engineering background gives Austin Underground the ability to perform work other firms often consider too risky. Rick and his team offer an end-to-end client experience, including seamless communication, budgeting, staffing, and top-notch trade partners. And most importantly, they produce solid, quality work each and every time. That's Austin Underground. We appreciate their sponsorship of the Thursday Coffee and Football.
Okay, guys. Well, it is time to bring in Fozzy, and there he is. And how you doing this morning?
What's going on, fellas? I appreciate the opportunity to come on, man. I am feeling fantastic. How you all doing?
You don't have a hangover from yesterday, Fozzy? So I felt like I had a hangover when I woke up this morning, but I said, you know what? A little hair of the dog will do you.
Not
good,
too
right?
much of a hangover this time, but I am truly pleased with what Steve Sarkeesian put together from a recruiting perspective. A lot of things that Sark mentioned yesterday in the press conference, as well as on our show on Longhorn Network, was about how he wanted to address needs. And then the versatility of a lot of these athletes, man. I thought that was extremely cool to see so many players play in different ways, playing both sides of the football, playing different positions on the offensive and defensive line. I thought it was a really cool overview of the entire class, and obviously finishing in the top 5 as of now, according to ESPN rankings, is something that you are looking for. And just, I think, a job well done, starting to see some of that momentum transition from 5-7 season, 8-5 season, and now you're 12-1 playing in the college football playoffs. You seeing those recruits come in and they're lining up to be able to play for a guy like Steve Sarkeesian.
I got to ask you, Fozzy, you've watched some film. You spent some time doing that a little bit, watching players. We ask Rod Babers all the time. He's a former Longhorn NFL player like yourself, like which players he likes. I know you guys have little favorites, every so often. Who are some of your favorites in this recruiting class?
My favorite to probably watch, and it's probably understated, and it might be the cliche pick, but Colin Simmons, right? You look at his film. I've seen this guy for the past 3 years, 2 precisely in the state championship game. I got a buddy, Trey Allen, who's a former Longhorn, one of my really close friends. He coaches offensive line down at Duncanville. Anytime Duncanville was in the area playing a football game, he would let me know. And if my schedule permits, I am there. And I got to see him up close and in person. That 22.5 sack junior season that he was able to have then, even the championship game that happened this past weekend against North Shore, 8 tackles, 3 sacks. This guy is an elite pass rusher, obviously one of the top ranked players in the country. I still can't wrap my mind how ESPN ranked him as the number 11 prospect. So you telling me there are 10 other guys better than him in the country right now? And that always has been one of those things where it's like, whatever. Coach Sark mentioned yesterday, they don't recruit stars. And he said, no offense to any of the recruiting websites, but they recruit the player and the athlete that they are now and where they think that they will plan to develop them in the future. And Colin Simmons is a guy that has a high floor because he's already performing at a high level, but his ceiling can be even higher from there. And possibly if he does what we probably expect him to do as a top recruit and as a premier pass rusher, could be the next defensive end great from the University of Texas that makes an impact at the next level. So that's probably a cliche pick, but seeing him in person for the past 2 years really kind of cements my kind of favoritism towards what he's been able to do over the course of his high school career.
Hey, Fozzy, I had one follow-up. My only question about Colin Simmons, I want to get, since you've seen him in person a couple times, what do you think? Is his size going to project long-term, even beyond Texas into the NFL? Is he big enough, in your opinion, to continue that kind of ascent all the way through?
Yeah, it's crazy because if you look at him on film, he looks like a little undersized. And whenever you see him in person, though, he's not that. If you were to create like a created player in the lab, that's what he would look like. I would say he's maybe closer to 6'2" than like 6'4". I want to say he's listed in high school as 6'3". So I would give him maybe 6'2", 6'2.5". But what that translates to is good flexibility, hip mobility as well. If you look on his film, and I'm sure you guys have already seen it, he bends the edge very well. Like he gets underneath offensive tackles, whether those tackles are 6'6", 6'4", 6'3", he's finding a way to use his momentum and leverage that and use his leverage to be able to either compress the pocket or get around that individual offensive tackle to defeat that one-on-one block. And I think that translates solid. I always keep going back to a guy that I played against and a guy that's from Texas as well, but Von Miller, right? I'm not saying he's going to be Von Miller or have the production that Von Miller has, but the mold and the build that Colin Simmons is like, he's built very similar to Von Miller. And I've seen Von Miller in person, hung out with him a multitude of times as well, played against him, obviously. But he has that type of quick twitch, go-getting type of attitude, type of mentality. And I do think that'll translate to the college level, and I think that would translate to the NFL level, as Von Miller has had quite a bit of success since he's been able to go on from Texas A&M.
Yeah, Fozzy, thanks for joining us this morning. I'm right there with you with Colin. I'm a huge fan of his. I got to watch him, like you said, for 3 years, dating back to his sophomore year. Obviously, there's a pair of guys in this class now that are going to be joining Tashard Choice's room. And I wanted to get your thoughts and kind of pick your brain on what you see from both Jarrett Gibson and Christian Clark. Obviously, both come from great programs. It looks like, Sark even called Christian Clark Bijan 2.0. And that's pretty high praise yesterday. But from what you've seen from them, I mean, what do you think they're bringing to Texas when they enroll and get on campus?
Well, number one, both of these guys provide contact balance. Whenever I'm looking at the running back position, you got to see, can you break tackles? Can you make people miss? Nobody did that better probably than Bijan did. And nobody thought Jonathan Brooks was going to be able to do what he was able to put together from a season perspective this past year with a number of forced missed tackles he's been able to create and generate, whether that's in the hole, whether that's in open space, whether it's behind the line of scrimmage that somebody came free. It didn't matter. Those two guys were extremely special when it came to that. Roschon Johnson is no exception to that. So over the past 2 seasons, this Texas program has been spoiled with great running back play. And even if Jonathan Brooks goes down, you got guys like CJ Baxter with that great contact balance, being able to score. We just saw it a couple of weeks ago in the Big 12 championship game. He's hitting, bouncing off of people, spin move, whatever the case may be, ends up in the end zone. And that's what I see from both of these individuals. Jared Thompson rated as the #1 running back according to ESPN. The dude is an absolute beast. Like, if you look at his lower half, he's like a bowling ball, right? He might not be as pronounced as like a Nick Chubb, but he runs the football similar to that Nick Chubb type of style of play, where people that try to go at his lower half, he finds a way to still run through that contact, still stays on one foot, whether he spins off of it. He has a really good stiff arm, similar to a Bijan Robinson that we saw. That was really good using that offhand. And he's just one of those guys that doesn't have a lot of mileage on him either. You look at him from IMG Academy, a program that has so much talent around it. We got his teammate also coming in on the defensive side of the ball, but that school has rich history. That school plays against some of the best competition in the country, for sure in the state of Florida. But this guy knows what it takes, and he was able to produce even with a limited amount of carries, limited amount of reps. So that's a positive thing whenever you look at it. Whenever his numbers call, he's able to produce. And part of that production comes to the fact that one guy or two guys, whenever they have a shot on him, they can't bring him down, and he still continues to fight and gain extra yardage. Christian Clark, very similar type of mold, slightly bigger from a weight perspective. Lower half is still extremely solid. And Sark mentioned, you turn on the tape and the similarities are there between him and Bijan, obviously from the same state, wearing some of the same colorways as well. And even kind of moves with the same type of mannerisms. It was weird because there's like one jump cut where Christian Clark is headed to the right side of the field, according to the highlight tape. And there's a safety trying to attack him, and he goes low on his feet. After Christian Clark breaks one tackle, he like jumps at the same time to avoid the tackler. And it was like that type of instinct. You can't teach that. That's not nothing that you can rep in drills and say, hey, if you're in this situation, this is what you do. That's a natural reaction that Christian Clark has. And he just has a knack for being able to get out of tackles or find space whenever there isn't space there. Even though, like I said, from a weight perspective, he's sitting somewhere between 210 probably somewhere 210, 215-ish, or at least that's what he looks like on film. So that should translate well whenever you're talking about contact balance in the college ranks also, especially against SEC linebackers, SEC secondary guys. And obviously the front seven, that's going to be a huge bonus for those two guys to be able to realize, this is what we need. And it takes some transition, right? CJ Baxter was not a finished product at the beginning of the season. He had to learn how to run behind his pads. He had to learn how to get powerful. He had to learn how to be able to generate that contact balance, use their momentum against them, have your momentum offset that to be able to stay on your feet and then be able to keep trucking along while keeping the feet moving. And so over the course of the season, CJ Baxter has gotten that down, and he's starting to turn into that individual that can be a difference maker for this Texas football team as they make the stretch down in the CFP. I can see Jared Gibson, I can see Christian Clark, whenever they get their opportunities, kind of realizing that same type of potential of what it means to be able to break off some of those big runs, even though you may have a limited carry count with that backfield being so crowded right now. Hats off to Tashard Choice, man. This Coach Choice been an unbelievable machine at the running back position. Obviously, who he's been recruiting over the past couple of seasons, who he's bringing in again this year. Dude's on fire. I don't know if there's a better.
He's a machine, like you said.
From an impact perspective, from a coaching perspective, and from guys playing in the NFL right now, I don't think there's a better coach in the country at the running back room right now.
Do me a favor, Fozzy. Go watch Jordan Davison. He's the next one. Go watch him on Huddle. He's out of California. I think he's the one that they may be pinpointing. There's another couple in state they like too, but watch that one. I want to mention this. You said contact balance, and I love that term. The thing that Tashard Choice also likes is just plain old toughness.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like Trey Wisner is slight, right? I mean, he's not a big built guy, but man, he's tough, right? And that seems to be what Choice kind of self-selects for, is that kind of not only contact balance, but he doesn't care your size so much as he does, hey, are you tough? Can you catch the ball? Can you do all the things I need you to do? Do you feel that it is the case as well?
Absolutely. You got to have a chip on your shoulder. That's something that Coach Choice, let's take it back to his playing days, right? How did he get to the level of success that he was at coming out of high school, then going to Georgia Tech, then playing in the NFL for the amount of years that he played at, and most notably with the Cowboys? But he played with a chip on his shoulder. He had an attitude. He had great contact balance. That's how he got to be in the position that he's in now. Then you take it to North Texas. Then you take it to Georgia Tech. Then you take it to whenever he's been at Texas now. And the running backs that he's been able to coach since he's been a coach have had the same type of attitude and pedigree about themselves, right? You got to be tough. You got to take on contact. You got to pick up blocks. Like that's something that goes unnoticed. But T-Choice, if you can't pick up a blitzer, you can't be on the field. And that's something that it gets instilled in offseason and spring ball. It gets instilled whenever they're going through training camp. It gets instilled in summer workouts whenever they're competing against each other. But man, if you go to them practices in the spring, and if you go into practices in fall camp, one-on-ones with the linebackers is where it is at whenever you're talking about Blitz Pro. And that right there is the number one attitude defining moment for a running back. Most of these guys coming out of high school, especially if you're being recruited nationally or going to the University of Texas, you got offers everywhere because you know how to run the rock, right? That's not in question. That's something you've already been able to do and something you've put on film. Can you, whenever you're not running the rock, still affect the play in a positive way? And that's whenever you start talking about the mindset of going to go pick up a block for a receiver, going to go pick up a block with the blitzing linebacker in the A-gap to protect your quarterback, give him that extra second to free up a Xavier Worthy or Adonai Mitchell or Jordan Whittington. And that's truly where you get that mindset to be able to create that chip on your shoulder that T-Choice had whenever he played. And now he's passing that on to the guys that he coached. But it starts day one. You step on campus. I remember Jaden Blue, his first time coming in, boy, it was a rude awakening for him. Jaden Blue looked like he had never picked up pass pro in high school. And T-Choice is like, hey, we going again. All right, we hit it, boom. All right, Blue, you back up. Let's go. Boom. All right, Blue, do it again. We didn't get it right on that one. Boom. And he was just going and going and going until he basically got the results that he wanted to see. And now we look at Jaden Blue here in year 2, and dude's unbelievable. Any chance he gets, he's showing off what he's been able to create over the past couple of seasons. And I think that's where you got to give Coach Choice his credit, because he's created this chip on their shoulder. He's created this attitude, this mindset, this toughness about them that allows them to perform even whenever they're not running the rock, because we know they already can run the rock with the abilities that they have, God-given, just coming into the program.
Fozzy, I look, you did a terrific job yesterday. You've done a terrific job with the Longhorn Network over the years, but you've seen the good and bad in the last 10 to 15 years of the Longhorns, been part of some of it. You know, my question to you is this. You and Griffin, Brian Robeson, y'all sitting there behind the scenes some Saturday nights or talking on a Wednesday or whenever you guys do your show, what are y'all saying behind the scenes about Steve Sarkeesian? Like, are y'all saying you would like to play for him? You know, this coach, I don't know if I like it. You know what I mean by that? I mean, players talk. Like, is he a guy that y'all would like to play for? The kind of things he does and that sort of stuff?
Absolutely. As a running back myself, obviously, it probably would have been one of the best offenses to be a part of, right? My favorite offensive producing year was my senior year. We brought in Brian Harsin. Brian Harsin came from the Boise State tree. And what was so special about Brian Harsin was he utilized every single player. And that's not a shot at Greg Davis, who was the previous offensive coordinator. Greg Davis did it in his own way. But Brian Harsin, it was the shifts, it was the motions, it was the way to create matchups against mismatch individuals. It was a way to get everyone involved. And I had so much fun in that offense because I was utilized in a multitude of ways that I hadn't been utilized in my entire career at Texas. And I thought that was really cool to be able to highlight those types of moments. And it wasn't just me that had those types of moments or had those types of opportunities. It was across the board. It didn't matter. We had 2 freshman running backs that went for 200 yards multiple times in different games. It was like whoever is wanting to be featured in this moment or whoever I think can win the best matchup, that's what we're going to do. And that's what I loved about Brian Harsin. And this is where Sark conversation begins to get inserted into us when we're talking about it behind the scenes. It's like, if I'm a receiver right now in the country, like, to me, for Ryan Wingo to be able to sign his national letter of intent yesterday, like, it's a no-brainer. If I'm a receiver and I see how he gets Xavier Worthy in space, how he gets Adonai Mitchell in space, same way with Jordan Whittington, same way with Tavian Sanders, I'm like, why would I want to go anywhere else? Like, this is the spot where if Sark wants to highlight me, I will be highlighted and I will possibly be a first-round draft pick, like he's been able to do with receiver after receiver after receiver after receiver, right? You go down the list, Sark's been able to do that. So for me, same way with the running back position, right? I want to be versatile. We see what gets paid in the NFL. Christian McCaffrey, the highest paid running back. What can C-Mac do very well? Well, everything. He can run it, he can throw it, he can catch it, he can block it, he can play receiver. Like, he does everything. That's why he gets paid the most in the history of the NFL. Nobody's doing that. And he's in the MVP conversation right now because he does everything well. Well, what did Bijan do? Pretty much everything. Line him out wide. Let him run. Let him catch it. What did Roschon do? Same thing, right? What are we seeing Jonathan Brooks do, right? How is Keelan being utilized? Keelan had quietly a phenomenal game against Oklahoma State in the Big 12 championship, right? He's been everywhere and on special teams. But Sark has found a way to be able to isolate individuals in great matchups and then exploit that matchup for the benefit of the Texas offense and the Texas team in general. On the defensive side of the ball, what I love about Sark is he let Coach PK do what Coach PK does, right? He mentioned it yesterday. He tries not to overmanage his people. He loves his staff, and he highlighted every single individual in his presser in his press conference yesterday. He highlighted every member of his staff, and he went offensive, he went defensive, he even went into the recruiting, He went into the player development. He talked about everybody. And that's what you want to see from a head coach. That's what Matt Brown did very well while he was here. Matt didn't have to touch his hands on everybody, right? Everybody had their own roles and jobs, and they performed at a high level. And that's what we're seeing PK do on the defensive side of the ball and getting people in a position to be able to make plays. We talked about the versatility of the recruiting class, right? You got 3-4 DBs coming in that can play corner, that can play nickel, and that can play safety. And that's where you start looking at the philosophy of like, okay, it doesn't matter what you were in high school. PK and Coach Sark say the best athletes and the best players, they're going to see the field, and we're going to put them in a position to be successful. So we field the best 11 guys, not just because you're in one spot here in high school or one spot there whenever you first come in. He puts the 11 best guys on the field. And that's the conversations that we have behind the scenes, right? B-Rob, Griff, myself, we're like, man, Sark gets it. He's a player's coach. He gets it. He understands what it takes to be successful. He understands what it takes for these guys to be able to play together. He understands the foundation and the culture aspect. Where we saw them 2 years ago is not where we see them now. And where we saw them whenever Tom Herman left, it's a complete 180 where this program has been. And even from the last regime to this regime, the honesty that Steve Sarkeesian has, right? And it's something that it goes understated. I don't know if a lot of people really understand how honest Sark is with people in pregame messages whenever he's meeting with us, or whenever he's meeting with ABC or ESPN or Fox. Like, he's very candid and open. And then in the post game, he tells you exactly what it is. He tells you what he sees. He tells you how it is. Like, he doesn't sugarcoat it. And if it's not right, he says he's going to fix it, and they go in and they fix it. But even behind the scenes, the conversations that we have on a personal level that aren't recorded or that aren't talked about publicly, like, Sark is just an honest individual. One-on-one, dude is unbelievable. And whenever you talk to a guy like that, you can't help but root for him just because of what he's been through, number one. But then number two, how he carries himself and the amount of respect and honesty that he has for every individual. And he gives the time of day for you. It doesn't matter who you are. He talks to you. He shares something with you. And it's very reminiscent of the way Matt Brown used to talk with people. Very personable, knew them by their name, would have conversation outside of just sports or football. And I get those same types of vibes of Steve Sarkeesian being a real, genuine, authentic individual, not just a coach, but just as a person. So I think that's where my love for him comes from, and I would have absolutely loved to play for him.
Yeah, I agree with you about that, man. I just so agree with you from my conversations with him as well. He's always upfront and honest and straightforward. CJ, you had something?
I was just going to say a part of that honesty that Sarkeesian had whenever he got to Texas was realizing that the offensive line was not where it needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was a hard conversation that he had to have, and a look in the mirror to say, to get to where I want my program to be, this has to change. And we've seen it change. Even with, you know, Bijan and Roschon departing, it feels like the running game has been maybe, you know, arguably more efficient. You know, is that offensive line, from what you've seen, is that a sustainable model? Do you think, you know, it's something that will continue to be a strength of this offense with the guys that they've got currently? And I mean, how impressive has it been this year for that running game to continually put up numbers despite, you know, 2 NFL guys departing from a year ago?
Yeah, I do think it's sustainable. Number one, if you look at the track record of what Steve Sarkeesian has been able to do, and it boils back down to his staff, right? And like I said, he mentioned it in the press game, or I keep saying press game, post game, but he mentioned it in the presser yesterday about his staff, and the most important to the run game in the offensive line is Kyle Flood. Go look at Kyle Flood's history. I know you all know it. I know a lot of the fans that are listening, they know about it as well. But what he's been able to do at all the stops that he's been at, with the number of draft picks he's been able to create, winning all types of individual awards nationally, and getting these guys to All-American, All-Conference status is truly amazing. And to see the progress that we see now, you talked about Steve Sarkeesian whenever he took over, where the trenches were, the state of the program at the line of scrimmage, especially on the offensive side, right? Defensive side, there necessarily hasn't been a huge drop off. But from the offensive side, we haven't seen offensive line talent consistently since the mid 2000s probably. And I might be even a little generous on that. Who knows? But to be truthful, this is the most consistent that we've seen an offensive line have in the past 2 seasons in back-to-back years, with premier guys that are going to get drafted, right? I mean, outside of Connor Williams and outside of Sam Cosmi, it's not too many linemen that have come from the University of Texas since 2012, I want to say. And those guys were great. Don't get me wrong. I love what they do, and they're still playing right now, making a ton of money and bringing their talents to their team and helping them win. But Texas as a program should not have that long of a drought between offensive linemen drafted, like ever. Like, if I'm being honest, with the resources that are put into Texas football, resources put into this program, the amount of coaching that is put in, no matter who the regime is, right? The offensive line coach at the University of Texas should have history about himself and should be able to produce top tier talent, because that's the amount of resources being put into a program like this. We hadn't seen it. Now that Sark is here, now that he brought Kyle Flood along with him and that rich bloodline of offensive linemen that has been with the programs that he's been at, we're starting to see that talent turn around. And obviously year 1 and year 2, the offensive line haul has been 2 of the best in the country, if you might ask me. Those 2 combined, I don't think anybody has had a better haul at the offensive line position. And then you couple that in with Baker coming in this year as one of the top offensive tackles from modern day. You got Kibble from Atascocita, Cruz coming in from North Richland Hills, and it's just the rich get richer. That's what I feel like right now, right? And Sark's been able to create that, but also the level of competition. Those guys, highly recruited, especially Baker himself has the highest from the offensive line position, but he's going against guys last year that were highly recruited, waiting their turn to step on the field, and guys the year before that were highly recruited and still playing right now or working to get on the field. And so the level of competition across the entire room has been up by like 10, right? It is not just one individual. It's not just 2 individuals. No, it's multiple individuals that are performing at a high level or performed at a high level at the high school ranks that are coming in vying for those spots. So I think that's been the biggest transition and the change. But ultimately, what I'm seeing in 3 years of recruiting is this is a sustainable model. This is a model that we wanted to see, especially if you want to talk about Texas fans. You want to see good offensive line play because that translates to success for the offense. But then also, you got to have that whenever you transition to the SEC, because the SEC is just a different beast with what they have up front at the defensive tackle and DN position. So being able to compete there, you got to compete in the trenches, and that's where we see Texas continuously get better with the lines that they've had over the past 3 recruiting classes.
Well, Fozzy, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Phenomenal insight, man. I mean, just absolutely phenomenal insight. We really appreciate you coming on. Before we let you go, real quick, give us your score prediction for the Washington game.
Woo! I have not nailed that down yet, so it might change. I'm not even going to lie. I may say something today, and then I might change it before we get to New Year's Day. I look at the matchups, man, and this is one that to me, it favors Texas. Vegas agrees, obviously, but it also presents some of the most challenging aspects to where Washington is successful at with the deep passing game and those 3 receivers, and where Texas has struggled over the course of the season with defending the deep passes, and especially whenever you have safeties guarding receivers on those deep passes. But ultimately, Texas, in my opinion, does get it done. I see this being maybe a 34-28 type of game. So if I give out just a prediction, I'll probably go there. Let's go 34-28, 33-28. I don't know, make it weird, something crazy. But 34-28 is probably where I'll stand. But that might change, so don't hope.
Fozzy, thanks for joining us, buddy. Hook 'em, man.
Absolutely, man. I appreciate y'all having me on, man.
All right, you be good, buddy. Thank you for this.
Appreciate you, Fozzy.
Thank you, Fozzy. Oh, man, just phenomenal.
That's a lot of knowledge.
No,
that's
great.
fun. That was fun.
All right, guys. Well, it's time for me to tell everybody about Prize Picks, Bobby, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. Prize Picks is a skill-based, really real money daily fantasy sports game. You simply pick between 2 to 6 players, and if they'll go more or less than their Prize Picks projection, it's just you versus the projections available instead of battling thousands of other players. It's really simple to play. It takes almost no time. I can make my picks and submit my entry in less than 60 seconds. And what I love about it is that it adds a ton of excitement to the sports viewing experience. You can watch your progress update in real time. You can win up to 25 times your entry amount, and then you can cash out your winnings with their quick withdrawals. All you have to do is go to prizepicks.com/OnTexas and use promo code OnTexas for a first deposit match of up to $100. This weekend on Prize Picks, I'll be on that NFL action. Prize Picks is actually running a special this week for Christmas and lowering certain players' totals. So I'm choosing Matthew Stafford to get more than 224 yards passing, Jordan Love to have more than 236 yards passing, and for Buffalo quarterback Josh Allen to go over 199. So to join me in those picks, you can go to prizepicks.com/OnTexas, use promo code OnTexas, take advantage of that first deposit match of up to $100, and then play anything and everything. They got NBA, they got college football, so just in time for bowl season. And that's Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy. All right, guys.
Well, I got to get out of here, guys. I've got an appointment that I cannot miss. But I just want to say this: 22 signees, 17 early enrollees. The latest news on Trey Moore. To recap, if you're just joining us, I talked to someone close to him this morning. He has not made a decision yet, but will have a decision, he said, by the weekend. That was the quote, by the weekend. At one point, they thought Texas was a, quote, shoe-in, but Alabama has made it a tough decision. We will know more probably within the next 48 hours or so on Trey Moore, the edge prospect out of UTSA. CJ and Blake, you guys take it from here. I got to get going. I appreciate you guys. And, it's the day after. Let's have a little fun.
Bye, Bobby. Have a good one.
Thanks, Bobby.
All right, CJ. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started here with some questions because we have loads of them. I feel like we have learned so much after talking to Fozzy. It's just insane.
Yeah, bring the heat.
Oh, what were you about to say? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was going to say let's bring the heat with these questions.
All right. Well, we got some super chats we're going to start with. This first one from Juan here, and this is for Bobby, but we're going to let you take it. He says, help see the perspective of Evan Stewart not coming here. I know he's friends with Cook and Ewers, and you're thinking Ewers and Cook will talk to Sark about having Stewart come to Texas. Your thoughts?
Well, I mean, being friends with guys on roster won't ensure a position will be there for you. I know that there's a need at receiver, and I know that Evan Stewart certainly fits the talent that Texas wants at receiver, and obviously has production and experience that fits what Texas is also going to be missing next year as well. But as we've been saying, and, this is something that I've heard dating back to his recruitment as well, I'm just not sure there's a desire to rekindle the flame that was between Sarkeesian, his staff, and Stewart whenever he opted to go to A&M out of high school. We've talked about the positions and the guys that Texas have targeted in the past in the portal, and you've seen seamless transitions into the locker room. You've seen the idea that these guys are going to be team first. They're going to walk in and they're going to lay down an ego at the door and say, whatever the team needs me to do, that's what I'm going to do. Look at Gavin Holmes, especially this year. This was a guy who played every snap for Wake Forest last year. Yep. He's coming into Texas. He's, rotationally in the spot right now at cornerback, but two guys that are very young, guys that a true freshman in Malik Muhammad and another that's a true sophomore in Terrence Brooks. So it's one of those things where you can't let, an ego or a single individual get in the way of what you have already created and what you are currently trying to continue to establish and instill with your culture. So I agree. I see the vision that Steve Sarkeesian and his staff have in terms of being picky with who they bring in. And also, you never know who might be available after the end of bowl season. I think that's something to watch to monitor very closely at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. Now we got one. This is directed right to you from Biggins, Minnesota. Thank you, Biggins. He says, CJ has the Longhorns hat and the Vikings board behind him. Hook 'em and Skull from Minnesota, my guy.
Hey, I saw the comments. I knew I had to get right today. That's actually that was a graduation gift up over here from Randall McDaniel. So very nice of him. I'm actually a Cowboys fan, but that will always hang up in my room as long as I got room for it.
There you go. And then Cliff Beckman, says, great coverage yesterday, guys. Best in the business by far. How many more will Texas sign before February? Over 1.5? See y'all in New Orleans. And I'm going to say this, CJ, let's not count transfers first.
Okay.
Let's just say high school prospects. How many do you think they will sign?
Ooh, not in counting transfers. I'll say one. I think they go get one of those 3 defensive linemen that we have mentioned. Alex Foster, Dominic McKinley, DeAnglen Evans. Obviously, we saw some movement in his recruitment late last night as well. So I think they'll go get one of the 3. You think about, potentially adding multiple of those guys, and then you look at what Texas has already signed, and, maybe it's not the right fit numbers-wise. Obviously, there's a lot of talent coming in on the defensive line as well. I like one of the 3. If you considered, portal transfers, I think 2. If you gave me the line of 2.5 with transfers, I'd probably be on the fence there. That's a 50-50 go at the moment for me right now.
For sure. Okay, well, that's it on the Super Chat. So we're going to jump over to some regular questions. And let's see. I'm going to try to find one that's not along what we talked to, or what we've already talked about here. We talked about FSU earlier. I do want to go back to that. Scott B says, would the SEC take Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina, and Virginia Tech? That'd be an interesting 4 to take. Do you think? I just don't know if I see all 4 happening. What are your thoughts?
I think if there were 4, it would be those 4. We've seen it with the Big 12 and kind of the private institutions. You want them to remain out with SMU. I think Miami would be kind of similar to that in terms of recruiting on an SEC scale. Excuse me. But if you look at what these 4 teams would bring to the SEC, obviously Florida State, football-wise, is the most dominant team in the state of Florida at the moment. Miami's been down. Florida's in the dumps currently. We know the success that Clemson can recruit to and put on the field as a result of them winning multiple national championships previously. And then Matt Brown at North Carolina. They've been a top 25 program in that conversation. They've produced multiple quarterbacks, Mitch Trubisky, Drake May. They would have that, bevy of talent that you need necessary for the SEC. And then Virginia Tech, you talk about one of the greatest environments in all of college football. Could you imagine an SEC Saturday night with Enter Sandman coming on and Alabama's on the other sideline right now? I mean, I think that would be an awesome addition. But I do think of the 4, those would be the 4. I don't think Miami would get invited, and certainly not Duke or Pitt. Definitely not. ACC, for my money's worth, is a pretty top-heavy conference.
For sure. And then North Carolina obviously would bolster the basketball, and then you'd also have baseball would go up a notch as well there.
Certainly.
All right, so let's take this one from Barry Sorrell. Interesting. So what does the front 7 look like moving forward?
This is a great question, and we're going to get a great idea of this, come spring football. Obviously, the edges should be set. There should be a ton of depth at edge. You get Ethan Burke back. You get Barry Sorrell. Texas is obviously in the market for Trey Moore. Colin Simmons is coming in. Justice Finkley's returning. The edges will be, I hope, much more, developed, improved, a step above what they are currently, which is still pretty solid. The interior is where you really start questioning things. I think Vernon Broughton is a shoo-in to be a starter next year. Trill Carter will be in that conversation. Jere Bledsoe, Aaron Bryant's also in that conversation. That's the uncertainty at the moment. And then when you move to the linebacker spot, obviously Maurice Blackwell will be in that conversation for the Sam, kind of that big body, big formation defensive linebacker out of the middle. Anthony Hill's also a guy that will return. Everybody can pencil him in as a starter as well. And then this is the big question. I'm a big fan of Leon Galafal. Does David Benda return? That Mike spot is something that is up in the air, obviously, because the assumption is that Jalen Ford will depart for the NFL. So we'll see. I see the comments now about Sadir Mitchell. I'm very bullish on him, but we've seen with big bodies like T'Vondre Sweat, it takes time to get that speed right. You know, it's a big growing curve right there for defensive linemen and guys who aren't necessarily ready body wise to step into a SEC lineup right away. This isn't a knock on Sadir; it's just part of the process for offensive linemen. It's very similar to what we see with, it's very similar to what we see with offensive linemen. The later they can step in their career, the more success we'll see immediately upon them touching the field.
Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that one. Well, we're going to stay on the defensive side of the ball for just a moment here. Horn7 says, how many snaps do we expect Colin Simmons to get next year? I think that is the $1 million question. And then how good can the Texas defense be next season as well?
You know, it's funny because I think the secondary is going to be much more improved. There's going to be significantly more athleticism on the field. Obviously, you return Terrence Brooks, Malik Muhammad. I think right now that will be the strength of this Texas team. The biggest part, and to the overall question of how good can the defense be, it's all about who can replace T'Vondre Sweat and Byron Murphy. And again, it's Vernon Broughton, Trill Carter. You know, Sadir will be in that conversation. Dre Bledsoe. If those guys can elevate their play to the level that we've seen so far from Texas defensive tackles under Bo Davis, it's going to be another good Texas defense. And to Colin Simmons, I think he'll be a rotational guy. Again, it's a busy room. There's a lot of bodies there, a lot of experience that is returning. Again, I'm always of the belief you don't want to throw freshmen into the fire right away. I love being able to get them reps in practice, development behind the scenes, and then throw them in when they're ready rather than being forced to the wolves.
And now let's talk a little recruiting. And we're going to start with this question from Zane Petty. He says 24/7 is reporting Sark is personally recruiting Aaron Butler, and he is now a take for Texas. What do we know about Aaron Butler?
Well, he's a fun athlete. That's exactly what I first thing that came to mind whenever I watched this film. 6 foot, about 190, 180, right in that range. From Calabasas, California. And Blake, if you remember Johnny Wilson and his recruitment back in the day,
yep.
The 6'6" wide receiver who ended up at Florida State, Texas was after him. He originally committed to He originally committed to Oregon. That's a great program. They throw the ball a lot. They develop good wide receivers. There's a reason why, he's as coveted as he is. He's a top 200 guy, top 150 guy in a lot of instances. I'm a big fan of Aaron Butler. But, and this is the big but, Texas has 3 guys signed in the class right now. They already added Matthew Golden, and while there is a void at receiver, do they go and opt for a guy that's more experienced, more polished, has been in the college program before, and has production on the field? I think that's more of the route that we'll see. But again, Aaron Butler's a fine wide receiver. It's just one of those things. You're losing so much at receiver. You would like to have a sure thing come in to the program rather than a developmental thing with Aaron Butler.
And then it's also important to note his dad was a former NFL player for a couple of years and is now actually his coach. So,
look at that.
All right. Ray Potter here says, with the loss of Hampton, does Sark and staff do a full court press to get Bussey? They are behind LSU in his recruitment. LSU thought to be the team that could most likely flip him from the Aggies, if so. But what's your take on that?
No, I love Terry Bussey. I asked, Greg Tepper earlier this week, because I've had the conversations in my lifetime of having Terry Bussey on the Mount Rushmore of Texas high school football players. I think he's that good of a talent, on both sides of the ball. Whether that's a little premature, whatever, I don't know. But I'm a big fan of Terry Bussey. Right now, though, I see Texas still playing in that third fiddle spot behind A&M and LSU. There has been uncertainty with LSU or A&M, which is where he's currently committed. Obviously, he did not sign with the Aggies yesterday. So LSU, and let's remember, Timpson is on that Texas-Louisiana border. It's out there. So I do think, LSU is probably in a better position for Terry Bussey, and obviously they've been after him a little bit longer. Texas early in his recruitment, and for whatever reason, just it didn't click. It took a while for him to get his Texas offer. He didn't, or I guess there's a few visits that he took to Austin where he left without the offer, and that kind of set things back a little bit. So it's interesting that now Texas is in a position to see, a possible late move again. I would have liked to have seen Texas involved a little earlier and all that goes into that recruitment. But right now, I think LSU is probably in the best spot for Terry Bussey.
I'm in agreement with you 100%. Russell Hinkle says, how do y'all see the 12-team playoff affecting recruiting and the portal next year? I don't know how coaches will keep up. And CJ, I don't either. I mean, it's already tough as it is with just the 14 playoff. I mean, we're seeing it right now with Texas. They're having to recruit. You know, you got National Signing Day. You're in the middle of all these bowl practices. And then you got the transfer portal on top of that. Obviously, the answer is to move some of this stuff around, but that, you know, the NCAA doesn't always do stuff that makes sense. So how do you see this playing out next year?
No, interestingly enough, I mean, Sarkeesian mentioning an earlier signing period in August was, you know, I won't go into too much of that, but that piqued my interest just a little bit. And as you said, it gets very busy for these guys or for these coaches around this time of the year. That would make sense for guys, you know, that are going to be locked into your program. On the other hand, though, I'm so excited for the 12-team program or playoff because it means there's going to be more meaningful college football to me. I'm looking at the bowl season now, and I don't find excitement in a lot of these games. You know, for most of these programs, there's 10 plus, you know, close to 15 players in the portal. Quarterbacks aren't playing. Your star receiver's not playing. The edge rusher that's going to be drafted is not playing. Coaches are gone. It's just bowl season and the magic that once surrounded it is gone for me right now, aside from the 4 teams in the playoffs. So I think the portal and the entries that we've seen will kind of be pushed back for the 12 playoff teams, which is going to help these guys, these coaches, really lock into their recruiting class and obviously the preparation that builds into playing in the playoffs. So I'm excited for the 12-team playoff, more meaningful football, and again, more opportunity for guys that don't necessarily have a future at their school to experience a once-in-a-lifetime kind of push for a national championship.
You know, it's funny you bring that up. I was just, as you were talking, I was looking at the bowl schedule here. And what have we had? Probably about 7, 8, maybe 9 bowl games so far at the most. And really only 2 have I been slightly interested in. Number one being Cal and Texas Tech. And then the second one, UTSA the other night. Just, you know, I do like watching UTSA play. So that's the only reason. But, I mean, I had no interest in the other ones. And, I mean, you sit here and you look at this schedule right here. South Florida and Syracuse tonight at 7, Georgia Tech, UCF. Well, that gets a little better, but then Arkansas State, Northern Illinois, Georgia State, Utah State, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I am so glad there's college football on television. I love taking it all in. But it's almost to the point where it's oversaturated on a lot of these teams.
No, I'm right there with it. And you can even scroll down because, I mean, USC is going to be without Caleb Williams. Drake May won't play for North Carolina. We know Texas A&M has 15 guys in the portal right now. Ollie Gordon won't play for Oklahoma State. The excitement and the names that we know and have heard all season long, just like, I mean, I'm going to sound old here, Blake, but it's just they don't care. It just doesn't feel like these are games that once mattered. And, you know, we can attest to this. When Texas played Oregon or played Arkansas, you know, down in the Alamo Bowl or Texas Bowl or whenever it was, like those games were fun. It felt like there was pride and bragging rights on the line at the time. I still get texts every now and then from Arkansas buddies, you know, of screenshots from when Texas lost that game.
Yeah.
And if that were to happen now and I tried to send it back to them, they'd say, oh, well, you know, the running back Rocket Sanders is gone. KJ Jefferson's in the portal. I mean, it's just no longer what it was. And I think that's a shame because this is what helped make college football so special in my eyes.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And, you know, I mean, you go back 5-10 years, you say, okay, Oklahoma, Texas A&M, you would tune into that. Or, I mean, you look at some of these other ones, but now, as you said, players sitting out, you know, it's kind of like the Georgia, Florida State thing. You wonder how much they're going to care, you know, but I mean, people will still tune in, but I think the excitement isn't there like it once was for a lot of those games because of the reasons that you mentioned.
Yeah, no, trust me, I'm still going to watch.
Yeah.
Probably put $1 or $2 on a couple too, but it just doesn't hit the same, you know?
Yeah, the enthusiasm isn't there as much for sure. All right, CJ, I want to read this comment to you from Sandman23. He says, CJ, just wanted to say we appreciate the knowledge and perspective you've brought to the show. A very good addition on Texas football. Thanks a bunch and keep up the great work.
Thank you, Sandman. That means a lot. It's been a blast so far with Blake and Bobby and the rest of the team. So this has been exciting and fun. I'm looking forward to it.
And then this goes back to what we were just talking about. Zane Petty, he says, why don't they just move the first signing period to August and have the second signing period in February? I mean, I'm in 100% agreement with that. And it sounds like you are too, and Sark as well. But, you kind of get penalized for making a bowl or even the college football playoff from a recruiting perspective, same way that Texas did getting into the Elite Eight last year. They lost a lot of recruiting time when it came to basketball. So they need to do something, no doubt about it. Okay, well, we got plenty of time to get not plenty of time, but we got a little bit of time left to get your questions in, so please do so. Let's do this. This has been a hot topic in the chat, it seems like every day. Any thoughts on a future linebacker coach pick? This one from Horn 7.
I do not know any names. I don't know necessarily where Texas is targeting for a linebacker coach at the moment. I do know that Sarkeesian is excited that Jeff Choate is around for the bowl preparation. He talked about it at length yesterday during his press conference. It's one of those things when you have a coach, and Blake, for most of these instances, when you have players that have committed the entire year to where you are now and they're able to stick around while also looking for brighter pastures, I think it's a win-win. And, for Coach Choate to go out to go out west and get that head coaching job at Nevada, I mean, congratulations to him. I do think Texas will look, and Sarkeesian will look for a guy that can develop talent, because as we've seen with his approach to the wide receiver spot last year, I think development above anything else is going to be what he covets as with his assistant coaches. We'll let the winning, the opportunities, the NIL opportunities take care of recruiting. And again, if you can walk into a school and know you're going to be developed, it's hard to say no when all the other boxes are checked.
All right, we're going to take this question here from Ray Potter. He says either the suspension of Derek Williams for the first half of the Sugar Bowl, or I guess he meant with the suspension of Derek Williams for the first half of the Sugar Bowl, who does Texas pair at safety for that half?
It'll be Taffy and it'll be Jaron Thompson. Obviously, Kyton Crawford will be in the mix as well rotationally. I'm eager to see just what they do with Jahdae Barron, whether or not he gets some snaps. He's been a guy they've used basically all around in the secondary. We saw it at the very end of the Kansas State game when there were some, obviously Ryan Watts was a bit banged up. But, I mean, in that goal line situation, Maurice Blackwell moved into the box. Jahdae Barron went out wide. So he's been that guy that they can plug and place everywhere. They praise his football IQ. Seeing him back at the safety spot wouldn't surprise me. Obviously, having a month of preparation is certainly advantageous in this situation. So it's tough because B.J. Allen's gone, Jalen Catalon's gone, Derek Williams is out for half. The safety spot was already a question mark. Now it's getting even thinner. So I do think those three guys, as long as they're on the field for the first half, that'll be the rotation. Jahdae will be the emergency, and then Derek Williams will come back for the third and fourth quarters.
All right, CJ, we'll take just a couple more questions here. UT Tyler guys, that's in general, how many high school players do you think they will take in the 2025 class?
It's a great question. And shout out to UT Tyler guy, because I spent my first year of college at UT Tyler. So that brings back some memories. I knew coming into this year, Texas wanted to be a little bit smaller in the 2024 class. Obviously, I think we're at 22 signees right now. A potential add a 23rd, maybe even a 24th. It depends on departures. Obviously, Texas has not been hit all that hard with portal departures this season. I do think there are going to be a lot of guys that will depart for the NFL after this year. I would say we're looking at another similar class, 21 to 23 in that range for 2025. Obviously, and Bobby talked about it yesterday, but leaving space for portalers and a perfect fit from guys with college experience is obviously important. I don't think you want to max up necessarily on guys out of high school, because it leaves you opportunities to go find talent and production elsewhere.
All right, CJ, this one from MJF. He says, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'll say 10 being the most confident, what's your confidence level that these guys stay another year? Collins, Brooks, Watts, and Ford. Let's start with Collins.
Collins, I'd probably say around a 3. I think he's a guy who, although hasn't lived up to maybe the 5-star expectations, has had a kind of rocky tenure as a Longhorn. I think he's kind of ready to move on from the school, just school in general. So I could see him certainly opting to go pro, even without the great level of production we've seen from other defensive tackles. What's that? Jonathan Brooks. This is a tough one because the injury certainly sets him back. But the production, and I even got word from an NFL scout buddy of mine that I inquired about when he was still playing, where was he sitting originally from the minds of most draft scouts? And, I got word back from him that, he did receive RB1 draft grades from a few guys. There were conversations of him being the number 1 running back in this class. And, again, ACLs aren't great, but it's hard not to pass up where you were to come back and potentially do it again. So I think he's gone. Ryan Watts is the one I mentioned previously. I don't know what he's going to do. I don't think he's in a position to receive a great draft grade, but I also don't think he's in a position to come back and see that his spot will still be there for Texas. They have great youth at the cornerback spots. They're bringing in even more defensive backs. It's going to be a crowded room. He's been beat deep occasionally this year. I don't know if his measurables are going to be incredible to overcome that. I don't know what he'll do. Possibly move to safety. I don't know. Jalen Ford, I think, is gone. Bobby floated around the hypothetical recently as well of what happens if he does come back. I think Texas is welcoming him back with open arms 100%. But 2 straight years of great production, great film. I think it's ready for Jalen Ford to join DeMarvion Overshown in the league.
All right, CJ, I'm saving one of the most in-depth questions for last year. This will be our last one this morning on Coffee and Football, presented by Rick Vavro and Austin Underground. And it's from Horn7. Again, he's had some good questions today. How would you rate this class compared to the last 2?
Yeah, this is fun because I think all 3 hit on specific needs. We saw Texas knock out the offensive line early on. Then they landed the defensive line and some edge rushers, plus Anthony Hill and Arch Manning. And, of course, this year has addressed the defensive back needs. Above everything else, Blake, there's been one consistency, and that's when there's a target atop of the list, of the priority list for high school recruits. Texas gets them.
Yep.
One way or another, whether it's through flipping them late in the cycle or it's just winning the recruitment outright. We're seeing Texas win every meaningful recruitment that they want to be after. Kelvin Banks, DJ Campbell early on. Anthony Hill, Jonte Cook, Derek Williams, Arch Manning last year, Colin Simmons this year, Ryan Wingo. Even after, the recruitment of Micah Hudson, who very early on, we knew Texas Tech was going to be a big player in that recruitment. And even when he thought, Texas could be in the conversation, that didn't hinder Texas from saying, all right, well, I guess we're out of the picture for a 5-star this year at receiver. They just went out and found the next guy. And I think Ryan Wingo, when you look at what he brings to the table, has just as high a ceiling as anybody in the class. So I think that's encouraging to know that the staff can pivot, very quickly, go out and find a guy and execute to win their recruitment later on in the cycle. Because, again, we're looking at 9 5-star guys in 3 cycles. It's pretty impressive.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And then, we're going to close with going back to something that Bobby talked about at the beginning of the show. Can you tell everybody out there what he had to say about Trey Moore?
Yes. So Bobby talked to his marketing rep, his agency guy over there, and, it felt like there was going to be a decision coming in soon, prior to the signing day earlier in the week. That's obviously not been the case. We did get word that by this weekend, a decision will be made. Bobby also said that it feels like it's a 50-50. Originally the word was Texas was a shoo-in coming into this recruitment. Alabama, as Alabama does often, makes things a much more difficult decision in the world of recruiting. So it's a toss-up at the moment for Trey Moore. Obviously, proximity helps him in the case for Texas as well. But yeah, a decision by this weekend. in a true toss-up between Texas and Alabama.
There you go. All right, guys. Well, that's going to do it for today's edition of Coffee and Football presented by Austin Underground. I want to thank Rick Vavro and Austin Underground as well. CJ, I know you and Bobby have breaking down the defense coming up here in just a little bit that you guys will have right here on Texas Football. And then later today, one of my personal favorites as well, Football Theory with Rod and Coach Bob Shipley. Their first episode of that last week was phenomenal, so I'm sure this week's will be as well. But yeah, guys, thank you all for tuning in. We definitely appreciate it. It was a very, very exciting day yesterday. Just so much going on right now on the 40 acres. Now Texas in full speed ahead for that Washington game. We want to thank Fozzy Whitaker for coming on. Got to thank Austin Underground and then Prize Picks for sponsoring today's show. And, of course, if anything breaks, any kind of breaking news, we'll have you covered right here on Texas Football. So be sure to hit that like and subscribe button and then ring the bell so you're notified anytime and every time a video is posted, whether it's, pre-recorded or us going live, so you won't miss any breaking news, rather. And for CJ Vogel, I'm Blake Monroe, and we'll see you tomorrow morning.